The office of the High Council smelled like cold stone and old decisions. Zirath 9 had sat in that room many times over the course of his long career, and each time it felt the same, heavy, formal, and just slightly uncomfortable, as if the chairs had been designed to make you want to leave quickly and not ask questions. He was 312 years old. He had observed 46 civilizations across 9 star systems. He had written reports on species that breathed sulfur, species that communicated through color shifts in their skin, and one particularly strange group that had no concept of individual identity and simply moved in large, slow groups like living clouds. He thought he had seen everything worth seeing. He had not expected to be sent to watch humans. The counselor who gave him the assignment was a thin creature named Vassarin, with pale silver eyes and a habit of speaking without ever quite looking at the person he was talking to. He slid a datapad across the table and said, in a flat and bored tone, that the situation in the Helian sector had grown complicated. The Drath Khan, a warlike and expanding species that the Galactic Assembly had been trying to contain diplomatically for the better part of a decade, had begun pushing into territories near human-controlled space. The humans had responded by sending warships. The Assembly wanted an observer on one of those ships. Zirath 9 looked at the datapad. He looked at Vassarin. He asked carefully why this assignment had come to him. Vassarin almost smiled. He said that Zirath 9 was experienced, dependable, and most importantly, available. He also said, and without any particular concern in his voice, that the Assembly largely expected the human vessel to be destroyed within the first engagement. The report, therefore, would be short. The assignment would not take long. Zirath 9 took the datapad. He did not feel good about it. He was allowed to bring 2 junior observers with him. He chose Pellix, a young researcher from a soft-spoken insect species called the Mivari, who had 6 thin arms, enormous dark eyes, and a nervous habit of clicking his secondary fingers when he was anxious. He also chose Draven, a tall and angular creature from the collective's analytical division, who processed information like a machine and had the emotional warmth of deep space. Between the 2 of them, Zirath 9 felt he had a reasonable team. Pellix would notice things, Draven would measure them, and Zirath 9 himself would try to make sense of whatever was left over. They traveled to the human warship aboard a small diplomatic shuttle, which docked with the vessel 3 days before it was scheduled to reach the contested region of the Helian sector. The ship was called the DFC-7 Resolute. It was a mid-sized destroyer by human military standards, long and gray and slightly blunt at the nose, covered in sensor arrays and weapons ports that pointed outward in every direction like the ship was permanently ready for an argument. It was not a beautiful vessel, but it had a certain heaviness to it, a sense of mass and seriousness that Zirath 9 noted without quite knowing what to do with. The captain who met them at the docking bay was a man named Cole Hargrove. He was not especially tall, but he had the kind of presence that filled a room without trying. His hair was cut short and going gray at the sides. His handshake, when he offered it to Zirath 9, who had read about the custom and was prepared for it, was firm and quick. He welcomed the observers aboard, told them they would have access to the main observation deck and the common areas, and asked only that they stay out of the operational corridors during active alerts. He did not seem particularly interested in them. He had a ship to run. Zirath 9 recorded this in his first log entry. The captain is focused. He does not appear nervous about the engagement ahead. This may indicate a lack of understanding regarding the scale of the threat, or it may indicate something else. Further observation required. Pellix was already anxious. As the 3 observers were shown to their quarters, small, functional rooms in a section of the ship near the rear, he kept clicking his fingers and looking at everything with his wide eyes, as if he expected the walls to start moving. The ship was loud in a way that surprised him. There were constant sounds, Footsteps above and below, distant machinery, the low hum of the engines running at full cruise, voices in corridors, someone laughing 2 rooms away. It was a busy place, a living place. Draven said nothing. He sat on his bunk, opened his data terminal, and began reviewing what was publicly known about the Drath Khan fleet composition in the Helion sector. Zirath 9 sat at the small desk in his own room and tried to write a preliminary assessment. He found he could not concentrate. Something was bothering him, though he could not name it yet. He put down his writing tool and went for a walk instead. The ship was bigger inside than it looked from the docking bay. He moved through the common corridors slowly, staying to the side, watching. He passed a group of young crew members sitting around a low table playing a card game, arguing cheerfully about the rules. He passed a woman, he would later learn her name was Laura Voss, who was showing a younger man named Danny Ortega how to hold a small stringed instrument properly, adjusting his fingers on the neck of it with patient, careful hands. The music that came out was not quite right yet, a little rough and uneven, but she kept encouraging him. He passed the ship's small kitchen area, where a large man with a gray beard, the weapons officer, and Ed Calloway, was making something that smelled strongly of spices, arguing quietly with himself about the correct amount of something he was stirring into a pot. He passed the medical bay and saw the doctor, a small and sharp-eyed woman named Nina Park, arranging supplies with a quiet efficiency that seemed almost too calm for someone 3 days away from a battle zone. Zirath 9 stopped in the corridor outside the medical bay for a moment. He watched Nina Park through the open door. She was not rushing. She was not afraid. She was simply working, careful, thorough, prepared. He continued walking. He found the bulletin board near the crew quarters. It was covered in photographs, small printed images pinned in overlapping rows. He did not know all the things he was looking at, but he could understand enough. And these were people the crew had left behind. These were the places they had come from. Faces of children, old people, animals, houses with green plants outside them. He stood there for a long time. When he finally returned to his room and sat back down at his desk, he opened his log again. He stared at what he had written earlier. Then he deleted the last line, the one about a lack of understanding, and replaced it with something simpler. He wrote, "I am not sure I understand these people yet." He left it at that, turned off the light, and lay down in the narrow bunk. Outside his window, the stars moved slowly past as the Resolute pushed on through the dark, carrying its 400 humans toward something that most of the galaxy expected would kill them. Zirath 9 closed his eyes. And he did not sleep well. The next 2 days passed more slowly than Zirath 9 expected. He had assumed there would be little to observe before the actual engagement. A warship preparing for battle, he had imagined, would be a tense and silent place. Crew members sitting at their stations, running calculations, doing whatever humans did when they were waiting to fight something 3 times their size. He had planned to spend the time reviewing historical records on the Drath Khan and writing the early sections of his report. He did not do much of that. There was too much happening. The Resolute was not silent. It was not even particularly tense, at least not in any way that he could clearly see. The crew moved through their routines the same way they had the day before and the day before that. People ate together. People argued about small things. People did their jobs and then, when their shift ended, went and did other things. Read, played games, talked, made noise in the corridors at hours that seemed unreasonable to Zirath 9, who was a creature of very regular habits. He began walking the ship in the mornings. It seemed like the best way to observe. He found Danny Ortega in the lower hull corridor again, this time alone, trying to practice the instrument Laura Voss had been teaching him. He was not good yet. He was playing the same short sequence of notes over and over, stopping when he made a mistake, going back to the beginning, trying again. He noticed Zerath-9 watching him from the corridor entrance and gave a short, easy wave before going back to his practice, without any sign of self-consciousness. Zerath-9 found this interesting, and he had expected embarrassment. He got none. He found Ed Calloway in the small library room near the middle of the ship, a narrow room with shelves of actual physical books, which surprised Zerath-9 considerably. He had not expected humans to carry physical books onto a warship. Calloway was sitting with his feet up on a low table, reading something with a battered cover, and he glanced up when Zerath-9 appeared in the doorway. He held up the book briefly and said it was about a man who caught a very large fish. Then he went back to reading. Pellix found all of this deeply confusing. He came to Zerath-9 on the evening of the first full day and sat across from him in their shared common space and said in his soft, clicking voice that he did not understand the humans at all. And he said he had been observing them carefully and he could not find the fear. He said that in his own species, before any kind of serious danger, there was a very clear biological response, a quieting, a withdrawal, a collective stillness that meant the group was preparing itself. He could not find any of that here. He said he was beginning to wonder if the humans simply did not understand what was coming. Draven, who was sitting in the corner running probability models on his terminal, said without looking up that this was the most likely explanation. He said that the Drathcon fleet in the sector currently outnumbered and outgunned the Resolute by a significant margin, and that if the humans fully understood what that meant, their behavior would almost certainly look different. He said fear was a rational response to a credible threat, and the absence of it suggested either ignorance or, he paused, running a quick calculation, a very unusual relationship with the concept of self-preservation. Zerath-9 did not respond to either of them. He was thinking about something Captain Cole had said to him that afternoon. Cole had found him on the observation deck, which was a small windowed room near the top of the ship where crew members sometimes came to sit and look at the stars when they had free time. Cole had come in with 2 cups of something hot and had offered one to Zerath-9 without asking if he wanted it. Zerath-9 had accepted it because refusing seemed impolite. It tasted strange, but not unpleasant. They had sat in silence for a while. Then Cole had said, in a casual way, that he had read the summary the Assembly had sent over about the Observer mission. He said he understood the Council thought this assignment would be over quickly. He said this without bitterness and without the kind of wounded pride Zerath-9 might have expected from a commander who had been told his ship was expected to lose. Zerath-9 had asked, carefully, how Cole felt about that assessment. Cole had thought about it for a moment. Then he said that it did not really matter what anyone outside the ship thought. What mattered was what his crew did when the time came. He said he knew his people. He said that was enough for him. Zerath-9 had not known what to say to that, so he had said nothing. They had sat together a while longer, looking at the stars, and then Cole had gone back to work. The crew meeting happened on the second morning. Cole called the entire ship together. Those who could not leave their stations watched on monitors, and stood in the main bay with no platform, no elevated surface, no dramatic lighting. He just stood among his crew and spoke to them the way a person speaks when they are not trying to perform anything. He said they all knew what was ahead. He said they all knew what was at stake in the Helion sector and why the Resolute had been sent there. He did not say it was going to be easy. He did not say they were going to win. He said, "Do your jobs, watch out for each other, and trust the person next to you." That was all. The room did not cheer. It went quiet, not the quiet of people who are frightened, but the quiet of people who have already decided something and do not need to say it out loud. Zerath-9 was standing at the back of the bay when this happened. Pellix was beside him, and he heard Pellix make a very small sound, not a word, just a sound, the kind of sound his species made when something was difficult to process. That evening, Zerath-9 walked past the bulletin board again. He stopped, the same way he had the first night. He looked at the photographs for a long time. He had been thinking about them since he first saw them. He thought about the fact that every person on this ship had something waiting for them somewhere. A face, a place, a life that existed outside these gray walls and this slow movement through the dark toward something dangerous. He thought about what it meant to carry all of that with you and still keep going forward. He went back to his room. He opened his log. He sat for a while without writing anything. Then he wrote, "I have been an observer for a very long time. I have watched a great many species face a great many things. But I am finding it difficult to write about these humans in the way I was trained to write. They are not behaving the way the data suggested they would. They are not preparing for death. They are not pretending the danger does not exist. They are doing something else, something I do not yet have the right word for." He stopped, read it back, then added one more line. "I am going to keep watching." Outside, the stars shifted very slightly as the Resolute adjusted its course. 1 day left. The crew slept, some of them. The engines ran. The photographs on the bulletin board did not move. The ship kept going forward. The alert came 12 hours early. The Xirath 9 was in his room reviewing old field notes when the ship's alarm system activated. A deep, repeating sound that moved through the walls and floors like something alive. He was on his feet before he had fully decided to stand. He had heard many alarm systems in his career. This one had a different quality to it. It was not panicked. It was simply loud and clear, the way a voice sounds when it has something important to say and wants to be sure everyone hears it. He moved into the corridor and nearly collided with Pelix, who had come out of his own room with all 6 of his arms half raised in the posture his species took when startled. Draven appeared a moment later, already calm, already carrying his data terminal. A crew member, a young woman Xirath 9 did not know by name, stopped briefly and told them that the Drathkon fleet had appeared on sensors ahead of schedule. She told them to get to the observation chamber on Deck 3. Then she kept moving, already running, in the direction of whatever her own station was. They found the observation chamber and sealed themselves in. It was a reinforced room with thick, shielded glass along one full wall, designed exactly for situations like this. Situations where someone needed to watch without being in the way. Xirath 9 stood at the glass. Pelix stood beside him. Draven sat down and opened his terminal. Outside, space was dark and quiet. For about 4 minutes, nothing happened. Then it did. The Drathkon ships came out of their faster-than-light transit in a pattern that Xirath 9 recognized from tactical records, a widespread formation meant to surround and cut off retreat. They were large. He had known from the data that they were large, but seeing them against the actual darkness of space was different from reading about them. They were dark-hulled and irregular in shape, with long trailing structures at the rear that served as additional weapons arrays. They moved with a kind of slow, heavy confidence, the way something moves when it does not expect to be challenged. There were 14 of them. Draven looked up from his terminal and said, without any particular emotion, that he had completed his probability assessment. He said that based on current fleet composition, firepower comparison, hull integrity ratings, and crew size, the Resolute had a survival probability of slightly below 4%. He said this in the same tone he might use to report the outside temperature. Pelix made a very quiet sound and pressed all 6 of his hands flat against the glass. Xirath 9 said nothing. He was watching the Resolute's bridge through the internal monitor mounted in the corner of the observation chamber. He could see Cole Hargrove. The captain was standing at the main display, looking at the same 14 ships that Xirath 9 was looking at. His expression was not afraid. It was not reckless either. It was focused. The kind of focused that meant a person had moved past thinking about what might happen and was only thinking about what to do. Cole pressed the shipwide channel and said 5 words. Battle stations. Oh, let's get to work. The Resolute did not slow down. It did not attempt to turn. It accelerated directly toward the Drath Khan formation. Zirath 9 grabbed the edge of the observation frame with both hands. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up the dark outside the window like the beginning of something that could not be stopped. The Drath Khan ships opened fire in a coordinated pattern. Several impacts hit the Resolute in rapid succession, each one landing with a vibration that ran through the floor and up through Zirath 9's feet and into his bones. Pellix made a sharp, high sound and pressed himself against the back wall. Draven's terminal screen flickered. Damage reports began coming in over the bridge monitor, but the Resolute fired back. The human ship moved inside the formation rather than away from it, at which Zirath 9 understood immediately was tactically significant. At close range, the larger Drath Khan vessels could not bring all of their weapons to bear without risking hitting each other. It was a dangerous move. It required getting very close to things that were trying to kill you. But it was not random. It was deliberate. Then the individual crew members started doing things that made Zirath 9 stop thinking about tactics entirely. The bridge monitor showed that a coolant line in the lower engine section had ruptured, a serious problem, the kind that could cause a chain failure in the reactor system within minutes. The repair team was not going to reach it in time through the main corridor because a secondary fire had blocked the route. On the internal camera feed, Zirath 9 watched Danny Ortega, the same young man he had seen practicing music in the corridor 2 days ago, appear on a different screen. He was on a maintenance crawlway, a narrow tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridor, barely wide enough for a person to move through. There was smoke coming from one end of it. He went in anyway. He moved through it with the kind of speed that did not leave room for hesitation. He reached the valve. He sealed it manually, holding the mechanism shut with his hands because the automatic lock had been damaged for long enough that the backup system could engage. He came out of the crawlway with burns on both arms. He went straight to his next station. Laura Voss was at the navigation console with a cut on her forehead that was bleeding steadily down the side of her face. She was not looking at it. She was looking at her screen. She was calculating a trajectory that used the debris field from a destroyed Drath Khan weapon platform as a gravitational slingshot, a path that, if timed correctly, would pull 2 of the enemy ships into each other's path. The calculation required her to be precise, to within a fraction of a second. She was. Ed Calloway rerouted the main weapons power through a backup channel that had not been tested in over 2 years because the primary channel had been damaged. He did it fast, and he did it right. Nina Park operated on a crew member with a chest injury while the ship was still rolling from weapons impact, while the floor was vibrating, while the lights in the medical bay flickered twice and went to emergency power. She did not stop. Her hands did not shake. She finished what she was doing and moved to the next person before the sound of the last weapon's impact had finished echoing through the hull. Zirath 9 stood at the observation window and watched all of this on the various internal monitors and through the thick glass, and he did not write a single word in his log. His data terminal was in his hand, and he had opened the log twice and closed it both times. He was not writing because he did not know how to describe what he was seeing in any language he knew. It was not bravery in the simple sense of the word. Every species Zirath 9 had ever studied had individuals capable of brave acts. What he was seeing was something different. It was bravery that was also completely ordinary. It was people doing extraordinary things as if this was simply what you did when the moment required it, as if the possibility of doing anything else, stopping, retreating, giving up, had never seriously occurred to them. Outside the window, a second Drath Khan ship began to slow, then a third. The battle was not over. It was not close to over. But something had shifted in the dark outside that reinforced glass, and Zirath 9 could feel it even from where he was standing. Pelix had moved back to the window. He was watching without saying anything. Even Draven had put down his terminal. The battle lasted 6 hours and 14 minutes. Zirath 9 knew this because he checked the timestamp on his data terminal when the last Drathcon ship finally pulled back. A slow, reluctant retreat that looked, even at a distance, like something that had not been part of the plan. 4 enemy vessels had been destroyed, and 3 had retreated with serious damage to their hulls and weapon systems. The remaining ships had disengaged and moved off, and the comm channels had gone quiet in the way they go quiet when the side that expected to win has decided to stop for now and think about what happened. The Resolute was still there. It was damaged badly. There were hull breaches in 3 sections. 2 of the 4 main engine cores were running at reduced power. Entire sections of the ship had lost primary lighting and were running on emergency systems, which gave the corridors a dim orange glow that made everything feel both calmer and more serious at the same time. The sounds the ship made had changed. There were new creaks and low vibrations that had not been there before, the kind of sounds a building makes after something heavy has struck it. So 41 crew members were dead. Zirath 9 learned this number from the crew manifest update that came through the internal system roughly 30 minutes after the last ship retreated. He read it on his terminal. He read it a second time, which he did not usually do with numbers. Then he set the terminal down on the bench in the observation chamber and sat with it for a while. Pelix was already quiet. He had been quiet since the last hour of the battle, when the outcome had become something other than what the probability models had predicted. He sat in the corner of the observation chamber with his arms folded close to his body, the way his species sat when they were processing something large and slow-moving. He did not click his fingers. He did not speak. Draven was still holding his terminal, but the screen had gone dark, and he had not reopened it. Eventually, Zirath 9 stood and said he was going to walk the ship. He did not invite the others. They did not ask to come. He moved through the corridors slowly. The damage was visible everywhere. Sections of wall paneling had been knocked loose. There were scorch marks along the ceiling of the main corridor near the engine access points. Somewhere deep in the ship, a repair team was working. He could hear the sound of tools and low voices carrying through the walls. The emergency lighting made shadows that were longer and stranger than usual. He passed the repair station where Danny Ortega was sitting on the floor, having the burns on his arms treated by a junior medic. Ortega was not making much noise about it. He was leaning against the wall, watching the medic work with a tired and patient expression. And when he saw Zirath 9, he gave the same easy, uncomplicated wave that he had given 2 days ago when he was practicing music in this same corridor. As if the 2 moments were not entirely different things, as if this was just another moment. Zirath 9 raised one hand in return. He kept walking. He came to a section of corridor near the midship storage area that had a dark scorch mark on the floor where something had burned and been put out. A small group of crew members was working to clear the area. They were not talking very much. They were just working methodically, doing what needed to be done, the way people work when they are tired and sad, but the job is still there in front of them. He passed Laura Voss in the corridor near the navigation section. Someone had put a proper bandage on the cut on her forehead. She was carrying a data pad and moving with purpose, already on to whatever came next. She noticed him and gave a short nod. He found Cole Hargrove walking the ship alone. The captain was moving through each section in a way that was quiet and deliberate, not inspecting, not checking on repairs, simply moving through the spaces where his crew was. He stopped in each section that had taken serious damage. He stopped in each place where someone had died. He stood still for a moment in each of those places, and then moved on. He did not say anything in those moments. He did not need to. The stopping itself was the thing. Zirath 9 followed at a long distance. He was not trying to observe the captain in any formal sense. He simply found himself walking the same path without fully deciding to. D. Cole stopped for a long moment near the sealed door of a corridor section that had been marked off. A section where, according to the manifest update, 3 people had died when a weapons impact breached the hull. He stood there looking at the door. Then he placed one hand flat against it, briefly. Then he walked on. Zerath 9 stopped when he reached that same door. He looked at it for a moment. He did not place his hand on it. He did not know if he had the right to. He moved on. He found Nina Park in the medical bay. She was sitting on the floor with her back against one of the lower cabinets, still in her medical coat, which was stained and badly creased. Her eyes were closed. She was not asleep. She had simply stopped, the way a machine stops when it has run at full power for too long and finally goes quiet. She was not crying. She was simply still. Zerath 9 stood in the doorway and looked at her and did not say anything. He did not want to disturb her. The stillness around her felt like something that belonged to her and should not be interrupted. He turned and walked slowly back toward the observer quarters. Pelix was waiting in the corridor just outside. He must have decided to walk on his own after all. He looked at Zerath 9 with his enormous dark eyes and said very quietly, in a voice that was different from his usual voice, lower, slower, that he had not known a species could carry grief and function at the same time. He said that in his own species, grief stopped everything. It was a full and complete experience that demanded all of your attention until it was finished. And he said he did not understand how humans moved through it while still doing the work. Zerath 9 thought about this. He thought about Cole Hargrove with his hand against that sealed door. He thought about Nina Park on the floor of the medical bay. He thought about Danny Ortega waving from the floor while a medic treated burns on his arms. He said he did not think the humans were moving past the grief. He said he thought they were carrying it with them. He said there was a difference. Pelix was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded, which was a gesture he had picked up from the humans over the past 3 days, and went back inside. That evening, and it still felt like evening, though the ship's time system had been disrupted by the damage to some of the lighting controls, Zerath 9 was brought to the crew dining area by a young crew member who said simply that the captain had asked if the observers wanted to eat with them. Zerath 9 said yes without thinking about it. He went and got Pelix. He did not go to get Draven, but Draven came anyway. The dining area was half full. The lights were working on emergency power. The food was simple. Practical things put together quickly. But the table was loud and warm and full of people who had just spent 6 hours trying not to die, who had watched friends die, who were sitting with all of that inside them and were still passing things to each other across the table and calling each other's names and laughing, actually laughing, at something Ed Calloway had said, which Zerath 9 did not fully understand, but which was clearly something about the look on a Drathcon pilot's face when the slingshot maneuver had sent 2 of their ships off course. Zerath 9 sat down. He ate. He did not talk very much, and nobody expected him to. People talked around him and occasionally to him, and the room was noisy and ordinary, and nothing like what he had expected the hours after a battle to feel like. He sat there for a long time. He did not want to leave. When he finally got up and went back to his room, he sat at his desk and opened his log. He looked at the empty entry space for a long time. Then he began to write. Not his official report, just his own words, just for himself. He wrote, "I do not think I was ready for this." He sat with that for a while. Then he wrote the rest of it, all of it, and everything he had seen, everything he did not have a category for. He wrote until the ship's emergency lights dimmed slightly for the night cycle, and then he kept writing. Writing the report took Zerath 9 4 days. This was unusual. In his long career, he had written field reports on 46 different civilizations, and none of them had taken more than a day and a half. Reports were not supposed to be difficult. They were supposed to be structured, factual, and clean. A clear description of what was observed. measured against established categories, delivered in language that the High Council could process quickly. He had been doing it for 300 years. He knew exactly how a report was supposed to work. He could not make this one work in that way. Every time he tried to fit what he had seen into the standard format, and it came out wrong. It came out thin. It came out like a description of a fire that forgot to mention the heat. He deleted his first draft entirely. He deleted most of his second. He kept one paragraph from the third and built the rest from there. He was still on the Resolute while he wrote it. The ship was moving slowly now, reduced engine power from the battle damage, and the repairs were ongoing. The sounds of the ship had changed again, back towards something more familiar, as the damaged sections were sealed and the lighting systems were gradually restored, section by section. The crew worked long shifts on the repairs. They complained about being tired in the friendly, half-joking way that people complain when they are not actually asking for sympathy. In the bulletin board near the crew quarters had one new photograph on it. Xyrath 9 noticed this on his second morning of writing. He did not know who had put it there or when. It was a small picture of a dog sitting in front of a house in the sun. He kept walking the ship while he wrote. He had come to think better when he walked, which was not something he had done before this assignment. He watched the crew work. He watched Nina Park move through the medical bay with the same quiet efficiency she had shown before the battle, as if she had simply refilled whatever reserve it was that she drew from and was ready again. He watched Danny Ortega return to his repair duties with bandaged arms, making the same small jokes he had made before, complaining about the specific way that one particular access panel refused to stay properly aligned. And he watched Ed Calloway, who was back in the library at the end of each shift with the same battered book, apparently in no hurry to finish it. He spent one afternoon sitting with Cole Hargrove in the observation deck again. 2 cups of the strange hot drink, the same comfortable silence. Xyrath 9 told the captain eventually that he was having difficulty with his report. Cole asked what the difficulty was. Xyrath 9 said he kept trying to write it as an analysis, and it kept wanting to be something else. Cole considered this, and then said that sometimes the thing you are trying to describe is bigger than the box you are trying to put it in. He said this without any sense of self-congratulation, the way a person says something they consider obvious. Then he asked if the observers needed anything else before they departed. And when Xyrath 9 said no, he nodded and went back to work. Xyrath 9 finished the report the next morning. It did not look like his other reports. It was longer. It used different language. It did not begin with a category assessment or a species threat rating. It began with Danny Ortega in the maintenance crawlway, the smoke at one end of it, the moment he went in anyway. From there, it moved through everything, not in the order things had happened, but in the order they needed to be understood. The bulletin board, the music in the corridor, the crew meeting and the quiet that followed Cole's 5-word address. The battle itself, described not as a tactical event, but as a series of individual choices made by individual people under conditions that should have made certain choices impossible. Nina Park's hands, Laura Voss's calculation, and the sealed door that Cole touched on his way through the ship. He wrote about the dinner table. He wrote about the laughter. He wrote about how he had not wanted to leave. He wrote, "The Vorkai Collective has long held that the measure of a civilization is found in its level of sophistication, in the complexity of its technology, the depth of its philosophy, the elegance of its social structures. These are not wrong measures, but they are not complete ones. What I observed aboard the Resolute suggests that there is another measure, one we have perhaps underweighted or overlooked entirely, the question of what a species does for each other, not in theory, not in its formal documents or its stated values, but in practice, in the actual moments when it is hardest. Humans in those moments do not abandon each other, and they do not calculate the cost and decide it is too high. They simply do not leave. I observed this across dozens of individuals over the course of 3 days, and I did not observe a single exception." He wrote his formal recommendation. He recommended, without qualification, that humanity be granted immediate full membership in the Galactic Assembly. He noted that this recommendation was based not on their military capacity, though that had proved considerably more significant than the Assembly's prior assessments had suggested, but on what he considered a fundamental quality of the species, one that the Assembly would benefit from having at its table. He sent the report to the High Council before he could second-guess it. He waited. The response came 3 days later. While the Resolute was still making its slow way back toward human-controlled space. He was in his room when the message arrived. He opened it and read it carefully. The council had convened a formal session to review the report. There had been considerable discussion. Several members had disputed the methodology. The report was too personal, too narrative, not sufficiently analytical. Others had argued that the events described were consistent with patterns seen in other young, warlike species and did not necessarily indicate the qualities Xyrath-9 attributed to them. Councillor Vasorin had requested that Xyrath-9 attend a session to answer questions in person. Xyrath-9 accepted. The session was held in the same cold stone room where he had been given the assignment. He stood before a row of senior council members, various species, and various ages, all of them watching him with the particular attention of people who have already formed opinions and are waiting to see if you will confirm them. Vasorin asked him in a politely skeptical tone whether he believed humanity was ready for membership in the Assembly. Xyrath-9 stood still for a moment. He thought about everything he had seen on that ship. He thought about the photograph of the dog on the bulletin board. He thought about Pelix saying he had not known a species could carry grief and function at the same time. He thought about Cole Hargrove putting his hand against a sealed door. He said, "I think that is the wrong question. The question is not whether humanity is ready for us. After what I observed, I think the more honest question is whether we are ready for them." The room was quiet for a long moment. The vote, when it came, passed. It was not unanimous, it was close, but it passed. Xyrath-9 sent a brief message to Cole Hargrove afterward. It was not long. It explained the outcome and said that a formal assembly invitation would follow through official diplomatic channels. He was not sure what else to say, so he kept it short. Cole's reply came back within a few hours. It was 4 words. "Huh. Good for us." Xyrath-9 read it twice. Then, for the first time in what felt like a very long time, he smiled, a slow, small, unfamiliar expression that he had picked up somewhere on that battered ship without quite noticing. He filed the response in his records. He closed the folder. He sat quietly in his office for a while and did not immediately start on anything else. Outside, somewhere on a ship still being repaired, and Danny Ortega was probably practicing his music. Ed Calloway was probably reading. Nina Park was probably working. Cole Hargrove was probably doing the same thing he was always doing, which was exactly what needed to be done. The Galactic Assembly had a new member. It had no idea what it had let in. Neither, entirely, did Xyrath-9. But sitting there in the quiet, he found he did not mind that at all.